And welcome everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful Apologetics Dojo, chatting with our good friend Steve Ray on the Assumption of Mary. And Steve, right before the break, you brought up two great precedents in the Old Testament of Enoch and Elijah being taken bodily into heaven. And the question was, if that's true for these Old Testament saints, how much more true for she who bore God himself?
Absolutely. Just a warning, there's a pretty good thunderstorm right here, and the electricity all just blinked, so I hope I don't lose my internet connection. And just okay. If I go dead, you'll know why.
Okay.
I didn't hang up on you. The whole thing is that I learned more about Mary from the Old Testament than I did from the New Testament in my conversion process. And I learned about Mary from the Old Testament and how you have to see that the old and the new fit together. This isn't just a new religion, Christianity, that got started out of nothing. And Mary is just a girl in a vacuum who happened to be chosen by God to do this. But it was with a whole history, a whole biblical background and a culture. And in that culture, the people of Israel had kings and they had government officials. They had royal stewards. They had queen mothers. They had everything as a kingdom. And it was all set there. When Jesus comes along, he is known to be the king of what? The king of Israel. When Mary heard the announcement of the angels, 15-year-old girl in a cave in Nazareth hears that you're going to give birth to a son named Jesus, and he will sit on the throne of his father David. Mary knew her Bible. This was not just some new angel starting a new religion. This is based on all that she already knew from the past. And she knew, I think when Mary heard that she was going to be the mother of the king sitting on the throne of David, that she said, oh my goodness, I'm going to be a queen. This would be her first thought because she knew her cultural history. She knew the governmental structure of Israel. Now, there's been no king seated on the throne of David for over 600 years. Once they went into Babylon in 586, they didn't have a king again. And even now, they're under rule of Rome. And there's been no king for 600 years. Think of that. Our country's only 250 years old. This is 600 years. They are the kingdom of Israel with no king, always ruled over by someone else. Now, she's going to be the mother of the new king. Now, let's go back and look at the Old Testament. What happened in the Old Testament when a man became a king? He would appoint a queen. Now, this isn't in the pagan cultures, but in Israel. When Solomon became the first great king after his father David, David had many wives, and there was no queen mother there. He just started the whole kingdom. But once his son took place, he was young, and his mother came into the throne room. The first thing Solomon did after he killed all his enemies, smart thing for a king to do. But the second thing he did is his mother walks into the throne room, and what would happen? And I gave this talk in London, England, in Ireland a couple times. And I said, what would happen if someone just walked in, even a relative, walked into the throne room of Queen Elizabeth II and just walked in without being summoned first? And everybody just kind of laughed and go, they'd be shot.
Right.
And I said, well, here we have the mother of the king walks in unsummoned, and she walks into the throne room. What does the king do? He gets up off his throne. He prostrates himself on the ground in front of his mother, and then he sits back down on the throne. And up until now, there's one throne, but he has a new throne built on his right hand. Now there's two thrones in the throne room of the king. Who does he put on that throne? He calls his mother and says, sit down here. You are now the queen of Israel. And as you read through the Old Testament, every time they mention a new king, they also mention his mother, the queen mother who's going to rule with him. Now, she's not there as a figurehead to look pretty and wear ornaments and jewelry and make him look good like a trophy mother. She is there to rule in the kingdom with her son. And many times the king would die and his little son, 4 years old, 5 years old, would be seated on that throne in his diapers. Now, who's going to listen to that kid? That kid doesn't know anything about anything. He can't even change his own diapers. So who's going to teach him about being the king? Who's going to rule while he's still a boy? His mother. And she's going to teach him how to be a king because she's the queen mother. And always you go right through the book of the Old Testament, whenever a king is installed, his mother is installed with him. And if anybody wants to get a little bit of information, this is a great book, by the way, trying to do it without a glare, called Ancient Israel, Its Life and Institutions by Roland DeVoe. It is a classic. No one questions the authentic archaeology and biblical history of Roland DeVoe. And in here, he's got a whole section on the Queen Mother and what the Queen Mother does and what her now remember that Solomon, who first appointed his mother, he could have picked a queen from his wives. He sure had a selection of them. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's a lot of women. This guy was a very busy king, but he could have picked from any one of those women, but he didn't. He chose his mother. And from that point on, it was always the mother of the queen. Now we come, I'll just read the verse to you. 1 Kings chapter 2:19. It's good for people to write this down. It might help them out. 1 Kings 2:19. So Bathsheba, mother of the king, went into King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of Adonijah. And the king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. And then he sat on his throne and had a seat brought for the queen's mother. And she sat on his right. That is huge. Now, if Jesus becomes the king of Israel, and he's obviously a better king than Solomon, and his mother's obviously going to be a better queen than Bathsheba, what do you think Jesus is going to do? Just like Solomon raised or assumed his mother up and put her on a throne, do you think Jesus would do any less for his mother? And when she died, he raised her up and he put her on the throne. And here's a little image of that. If you want to see a little image of that, Mary doesn't show her on the throne here, but it shows her with a crown, and it shows her with a baby in her womb. And this is the Ark of the Covenant. And in Revelation 12:1, you see it right there. I'm doing it backwards. Revelation 12:1, it says, "Behold, I looked into the heaven, and I saw the woman." I think that's taking your eyes right back to Genesis 3:14. And what did Jesus call his mother in the Gospel of John? When she first interceded for the people of God at the wedding feast, he calls her woman. And then refers to Mary the next time in the Gospel. It's only mentioned twice, Mary is. Both times she's called the woman. At the cross, woman. Why does Jesus do that? I think he's drawing attention to Genesis 3:14, the woman who would bring the enmity between you and the woman and her seed and your seed. And also that when we get to the book of Revelation as the Queen of Heaven with her crown on here, that we would recognize her when it says that here I saw the woman. John, the same author, I'm convinced John wrote Revelation and the Gospel of John. And John, the same guy who recorded Jesus calling his mother the woman, in Revelation said, "Behold, I saw the woman." Same one.
Yeah.
Seated, she's a queen. Now, in Revelation, it says, the problem in Revelation is that people read one chapter, they read chapter 11, they end with verse 19 there, and then they close the book and they